Welcome to Inspiration Inc. We have a very special guest with us. We have a man who started at a very scratch level, and today he is one of the biggest names as far as Indian capital markets are concerned. We have Mr. Rashesh Shah with us from Edelweiss. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm here. Thank you for having me.
And I think the name explains Inspiration Inc. So you know what kind of questions I'm going to ask. But I want to start with a very basic question, which is, after your education and after you passed out from IIM and all, and when you joined ICICI, that time, did you ever think that this is what you will end up doing, or you will have one of the country's largest, I would say, investment banks, which you will run?
Actually, no. To be honest with you, one of the reasons for going to, for an MBA, going to IIM Ahmedabad was so that you can get a job and you can work as a professional in an organization. So that was my dream. I come from a very traditional business family. So all my life I wanted to avoid doing business. I wanted to be more a professional, wear a suit and a tie and go to office, rather than be an entrepreneur and run your own business. But I think I joined ICICI in 1989 after my MBA. And those 4-5 years were when India started opening up, economic liberalization was happening. And for the first time you could feel it, you could sense it, that there was a new India that was being
emerging.
That was emerging, and there were new age entrepreneurs who were coming. The IT sector was just getting off the ground. Pharma companies, IT companies, all these were new age entrepreneurs. These were not your old business houses who had been there for quite some time. So 93 to 95 was a very, very fertile period for a new Indian financial services was getting created. And of course it's easy now to sit and connect the dots. FII, NSE, SEBI, private banks, private sector mutual funds. It's easy to connect the dots now.
Correct.
At that time you could feel it, you could sense it. It was in the air. But I think it was at that, I think because of that I abandoned my old aspiration of being a professional, and in the what I call the the madness of youth, we said let's try and build a new age financial services. Our ambition was always to build a financial services company.
Correct.
For a new age India.
Right. But was there some sense of I would say anxiety or insecurity when you decided to take that step? Because it's not very easy leave behind a secured job at a very high profile designation and then start something on your own, and especially that too in a sector which was then not very organized. I mean, in India the financial markets were not really that organized in the 80s and 90s.
True. But if you see anxiety is inevitable. I think anxiety is always going to be there. So yeah, when you start up a new company, when you start your own venture, there is always going to be anxiety, and the color of anxiety changes over the years. But as you get older, you also learn to manage it, and you make sure the anxiety, if it is there, it is more constructive and productive rather than destructive. It was very clear to us that India's growth is happening. How much we'll grow, how we'll grow, all that was there. We had some hypotheses around Indian financial system, the role of banks, the role of NBFCs, capital markets, bond markets. Not all of them have actually come true, but it was, and if you look at all countries in the world, I mean the way the financial sector has grown, whether it's in USA, whether it's in China, whether it's in Brazil, all these places, you go and look at it, as country has grown, financial services has grown in a particular way. So that hypothesis was there, and as anxieties are always there. All aspirational individuals, all aspirational organizations always have anxiety.
So can you throw some light on the early days when you just started off and Edelweiss was still in the making? How did it go, the early days?
So the early days, I mean, we actually had absolutely perfect timing. We started Edelweiss almost at the peak of Indian financial. So what happened between 93 to 95, a lot of good things happened. The markets were doing well, emerging markets were coming in. India saw a lot of capital flows from FIIs. We started Edelweiss in 96, which was, as I said, perfect timing, because everything went wrong after that. After 96, we had the Asian financial crisis, we had the the LTCM crisis in USA. Right. So 97, 98 were actually very bad years. Even India was very bad. If you look at interest rates went up very high. We had AAA paper in India being quoted in 1997 at 20%. We had interest rates of that, of that high nature. So very high interest rates, very tight liquidity. The NBFCs were collapsing at that time. There was an NBFC crisis. But I think even in that phase, we kept on investing in the organization. We kept on building. We actually we started with 2 people in 96. By 98, we were 8 people. So we made sure that we were somehow managing. We didn't make any profits. We were just about breaking even. And after 98, things improved, and there was that internet and IT services. Correct. And there was a boom in the market. So 99, 2000 were very great years.
Right. So today, I mean, because you spoke of that opportunity that you sensed, and it was in the air. Today, what do you sense in the air when it comes to India, when it comes to your business, when it comes to growth prospects? So, I mean, what is your take today? What is your sense?
I think overall things are a lot actually better now than they were then. A lot of good things have happened in India. But what happens, the problem we all have is India's story is good on a long-term basis. On a short-term basis, there is a lot of volatility. So if you look at the stock market, if you look at even financial system, like to give you one very simple number, the total deposits in banks in 1995 was 5 lakh crores, 5 trillion rupees. But today that has become 120 lakh crores.
Correct.
So there has been, in financial services between 95 to now, there has been a CAGR of about between 15 to 18%, whether it's in bank deposits, bank credit, home loans, insurance premium, assets under management in mutual fund. Every part of financial services has grown between 15 to 18% CAGR. But this has come with an immense amount of volatility. And India is a lot more volatile than other countries because we have the market volatility, we have the regulatory volatility, and we have what I call the media volatility because the media amplifies whatever is the underlying volatility. Because very vibrant media, so some difference of opinion or some tug of war between RBI and government is amplified in the media to such an extent that a lot of people start actually worrying कि India का future क्या होने वाला है.
India का, right.
So regulatory volatility because new things are introduced. There is a GST, right. There was demonetization, RERA. All these are good things, but that does add to some amount of
stress,
turbulence, uncertainty, change. Have to live with a lot of volatility. So you have to learn to live with short-term volatility, but keep your faith in the long term.
Right. So how do you manage to do that? What is your guiding principle when it comes to your business, or let me put it this way, what is your philosophy of life when it comes to running your business? Because after a certain stage, it's not about only your business, it's also about people you employ, it's also about your shareholders, and it's about the larger cause of I would say wealth creation and contributing to the nation building. It
is not hard to envisage, but it's hard to do. It's like we always say, if you want to be healthy and fit, the formula is very simple: eat carefully and exercise regularly. But it's easy but hard to follow. The same thing is about being having the bifocal vision. I think so. One is in Edelweiss we talk about being long-term aspirational. Keep on communicating what are the long-term aspirations. It can't be a plan because plans will change. The world will change your plan. So we in Edelweiss call it a 10-year aspiration, a 3-year plan, and a 1-year budget. So work with aspiration, have long-term aspirations. The other is try and be counter-cyclical. In India, one of the hardest things is we all become very pro-cyclical. So when things are going down, you feel the world is going to end, everything is going to collapse. So the idea is, can you be long-term aspirational? Can you think counter-cyclically rather than be very pro-cyclic and extrapolate the current trend, because reversals happen.
True.
So like even in the NBFC sector, as you know, last quarter it looked like everything is coming to an end, everything was on fire, and everybody's story is over.
But you think it's behind us now, the broader NBFC crisis?
See, what happened, it was never an NBFC crisis. I mean, it was an ILFS crisis. ILFS was always an infrastructure company when it was healthy. When When it defaulted, it became an NBFC. So what happened on the day it defaulted, that suddenly people said, well, ILFS was not doing home loans, ILFS was not doing SME loans. If you ask anybody, any article of the last 10 years on NBFC, the one company that will not appear will be ILFS. I think there was a correction that was due because NBFC was over-owned, the growth expectations were going slightly out of proportion, and there was a need for reallocating capital even with the investors from banks to NBFC. Reallocation had happened. Now a little bit of reallocation has already happened between NBFC. So the cyclical part is over. The structural part is unfolding, where I think NBFCs will focus more on the liability side of, which I think is very good, because all NBFCs were focused more on the asset side of the balance sheet. I think the growth rates might get tempered down from NBFCs growing at 30% a year. They'll grow at 20% a year. From ROEs of about 20%, they'll come down to 18%. So there is a new normal, which is more balanced, more stable, and I think actually looking very, very interesting now. So the future looks very exciting, having gone through this what we call Agni Pariksha. In a way, the stress test was also good, and I'm happy it happened now. It didn't happen a year from now, because some of the excesses would have got built up. So the markets have their way of balancing, recorrecting. There was too much NBFC and too little banks. Now that correction is also happening.
Back now. True. But tell me one thing, as an entrepreneur, when because if I look at your own business also, so you have actually diversified in a very smooth way, and more than smooth, I would say in a consistent way. So if you look at your business verticals, and that too in a volatile market like this, because even if you take last 10 years from 2008 to 2018, we have at least seen two major cycles of complete bear phase and then complete bull phase. So that's technically 4 cycles in last 10 years. So in the middle of that, how do you manage this diversification? And 10 years from now, let's say, what is your vision then for Edelweiss?
So, as I was saying earlier, basically volatility is inevitable. So in Edelweiss, we have a phrase that we use, which is saying manage the volatility and play the trend. What happens to a lot of people, they try to play the volatility. They want to buy low, sell high. You have to be very smart at that. We are not that smart people, so we don't try to play the volatility. We try to manage the volatility, but we like to play the trend, because the long-term trend in India is very upward, very optimistic, and there is a great opportunity out there. So how do you play the trend? How do you manage the volatility? One way of, as I said, being counter-cyclical, being long-term, but the third part of it is being diversified, because when you are diversified, you can actually be counter-cyclical. Like when capital markets was down in 2011-12, we made a lot of investments. We hired bankers, we improved our research, invested in that, because that time people were available. You can be counter-cyclical if you are diversified, because there are some parts of the business are doing well, they are throwing out the cash, you have the resources of that, and you can invest in the ones which are currently on a down cycle, because the best time to invest, always start businesses in down market and always scale them up in good markets. But you can't scale them, you can't start them in good markets.
Right.
So if you imagine when a skyscraper is getting constructed, the first half is when the foundation is being laid.
True.
But if you see the foundation time, it looks very ugly. It's all keychared out there, excavation is going on,
all the dirty work happening,
some steel rods are coming out. At that time, you can never imagine what the skyscraper will look like. Only when the superstructure comes in, the glass and the steel frame that comes out, they'll say, oh wow, what a building that is. But that building would not have happened if the foundation was not laid. Everybody wants to build the superstructure, nobody wants to lay the foundation.
10 years or 20 years from now, what is going to be the driver for your business? Because India is going to expand, from 2.6 we will grow to 5 trillion, and even beyond that. I mean, I was reading one report that by 2030 probably will overtake US as the second largest economy. So what is going to drive your business? Which are the verticals where currently you feel you should invest?
So see, India's GDP will double every 7 to 8 years. We were approximately 1 trillion in 2007. We became
Correct.
2 trillion in 2015. And that phase also had global financial crisis, India policy paralysis, all that stuff. And in spite of that, our GDP doubled in approximately 7.5 years.
Right.
So you can assume that as a rule of thumb. So by 2030, India will become larger than US on a purchasing power parity.
Correct.
Not
Yeah,
on absolute.
obviously.
On absolute, by 2040 will become bigger than US. But I think purchasing power parity, we are already third largest in the world.
Right.
So that is what I'm saying. India growth is given. But I think that growth with quality is where the real juice will come out. And the same thing applies to Edelweiss. We will have growth opportunities. But can we do it with quality? And I think we are very, very optimistic around retail credit, because we think the democratization of credit in India is a trend. And only last 8-9 years we have really seen retail credit in India, household credit, mortgages, SME credit, all this falls part of retail. Because if you look at in India, until 1980 government got all the capital. Then from 1980 till 2010 the corporate sector got all the. Only after 2010 there is a large group of borrowers who are credit worthy but were not earlier getting credit. They are getting credit now. Whether you look at the microfinance companies, you look at the growth of home loans and others. So I think this particular phase of what is called democratization of credit in India is here to stay for the next 20 years.
20 years.
So education loans and all are now becoming popular. So I think a retail credit will be one big area of growth. We already have been doing it for 10 years. The distress, we are already leaders. I think there will always be opportunity in India to buy NPLs and turn them around and unlock value in that. And the third one is asset management and wealth management, because Indian household wealth is growing very rapidly. 10 years ago the household wealth was $3 trillion. Now we are at $8 trillion. By 2030, India's household wealth will have crossed $25 trillion. $25 trillion of household wealth. You will need asset management, wealth management products and services to cater to that. So we are just at the start of that phase, and we have built a fairly robust alternative asset management business. We have already built a wealth management business and we are leaders in all these businesses. But we have to grow with good quality.
Correct.
Customer experience, risk management, governance, compliance. So if you've seen in the past, India has had this NSCL crisis and all of that. Idea is to avoid all of that.
You remain largely untouched. I remember even during NSCL.
It takes a lot of effort on governance, compliance. So you should not get so carried away by growth. So if you ask me the next 10 years, these are the growth areas. But how we do it will depend on how well we can manage risk and governance and customer experience and all of that, while still capitalizing on India's growth opportunity.
Right. I'm going to ask you a couple of personal questions. One is the success of your fitness regime. I mean, I know you are a marathoner also and a very avid swimmer, but how do you manage the discipline part of it?
See, first of all,
it's so difficult for us.
Everybody thinks everybody else is fit and I'm struggling. So I would like to start with a disclosure and all. I struggle as much as anybody else. When I run, when I swim and all, it's always, I mean, nothing is very easy in that sense. But I think it is important, because I think, I think managing that part of your, health and wellness and all is very important. And discipline is as hard. I think getting up at 5:30 in the morning and putting the shoes on and all, it's always a struggle. But if you know it's always a struggle, you do that. It also teaches you a lot. Like for example, when I was telling you about long term and short term, I have learned that when you run a 42-kilometer full marathon, you don't ever run 42 kilometers at a time. Even in your mind, you never run 42 kilometers. You basically run 1 kilometer 42 times. And that is how you manage the short term and the long term at the same time. If you keep on running 1 kilometer, so every kilometer you have a particular objective or a goal, saying I'm going to do this in this kilometer and this kilometer, and hopefully 42 kilometers go by smoothly in that. So I think you learn a lot. So there is a lot of cross-pollination that happens between what you do for your health and fitness into the business also. It also allows me to channelize my energy there, so I'm not overly active, and allow a lot of other leaders in Edelweiss to do their stuff and not overly be intrusive or interfere, and that has also helped. But I think what also helps is having a social structure around that. I've seen any health and fitness, structure which is where you're alone all the time. Yeah, when you run and swim, you're alone. I mean, you are with yourself. But having a group of friends with whom you go to the club to swim, and then after the swim, you sit and have breakfast together. All those are also very good things to do. So I always say that have a group, have a social structure around that. Underneath that, you can do your health and fitness and whatever you do, and they also then keep you disciplined. So their friends will text you and saying, "Kal morning 5 baje, milna hai," and then you can say no once, twice, but then you ultimately say, "Abhi
peer pressure."
I will get up. So having a group also helps.
Right. So what is most? That's a very inspirational thing. Actually, you just mentioned, the taking it as it comes per kilometer. But otherwise, the most inspirational or influential person, book, anything which inspires you the most?
I'm actually very easily inspired. So I get inspired by a lot of things. So I've been inspired by a lot of companies in India who have done fabulously well.
Right.
I've studied at least about 25 companies in India who have managed 25% growth over 25 years. So we call it 25, 25, 25. And there are companies like, Asian Paints and Marico and HDFC and all of them. So there are some great companies in India who have done very well. So I always get inspired by them, by the leaders out there. India has also produced some great leaders. There are a lot of global leaders out there, Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett and all. I read all his annual reports. I've followed him closely because there's so much inspiration that you can derive from there. I follow Dalai Lama. There is a lot of inspiration in that. Also, as you were earlier asking, all companies are anxious. So how do you manage it? I think the Dalai Lama has a lot of stuff. So there's a quote that I use very often, which is Amitabh Bachchan talks about it, about his father. Harivansh Rai Bachchan once told him, agar man ka ho to acha, man ka no ho to aur bhi acha. And that is what you learn when you run business, because things go wrong. But even when they go wrong, there is something good that comes out of it. So I must confess, I'm very easily inspired. I get inspired by everybody.
But also you love sports, because I have seen, in fact, you do a lot of, I would say, active supporting activities also in terms of, supporting sports infrastructure in India, supporting sports persons.
We are the sponsor for the Indian Olympic team.
Yeah, that's what. So you think there is more scope for improvement there? Because as a sporting nation, unfortunately, apart from cricket, we still lag behind somewhere.
Absolutely. I think sports is very essential to, and I don't call it only professional sports. I think health, fitness, all of that falls part of that. It is very important for our country. As I said, India will grow.
Correct.
But the quality of a growth is up to us.
Right.
I think growth in a way is inevitable because that genie is out of the bottle. But how we grow is up to us. And I think the good thing about sports is it is very meritocratic, and a lot of athletes you see, especially Olympic athletes, they come from humble beginnings. We've seen that in cricket also last 20 years. A lot of people, MS Dhoni coming from Ranchi and all. So it's a great equalizer. It brings people from all parts of India, and you are only as good as what your capabilities are, what your discipline is, what your application is, what your investment is. So I think that is one. Again, sports is about excellence, about constantly improving yourself, which is also great inspiration to have. So I think all of those qualities that sports gives you. And again, there is no real payoff from an economic point of view, though there are people make careers out of it. But when you run a marathon or you swim and all, the payoff is more internal. The people, so a lot of the payoff is internal. That also we all have learned, that internal payoffs and all that. So I think all of those things about sports is what it appeals to me. And it's endless, right? You are constantly wanting to improve, wanting to enjoy more, wanting to get better, wanting to learn new things, all of that. So there are parts of sports which are very, very great. And there is an old Latin saying, which is animo sani e corpo sano, which is a healthy mind in a healthy body. So having a healthy body is very important for having a healthy mind, and having a healthy mind is very important for having a healthy body.
Right. I think that's the best way to wrap this conversation. Thank you so much, and all the best. It was, as always, very inspirational speaking to you.
Thanks a lot.
And I hope to run 40 kilometers next time with you in marathon.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thanks.